Good morning. Ayin Beis, volume 3. We are on page 1282. Aleph Reish Pei Beis. And we finished the paragraph answering, at least briefly, the question that he asked on page 1281, which was, we still need to understand Kol Ikara Inyan, the primary premise that was discussed earlier, that Hamshachas Mitzvahs, the Hamshach of Mitzvahs, is specifically not just Mitzvahs, but after the preparatory Aveda of Aver Rabba B'chol Meidecha, of a great love, all the way to B'chol Meidecha, as we learned earlier, that completely consumes the person in a deep, passionate love. Why can't the Hamshacha be through mitzvahs themselves? A mitzvah is Ratzon Elyon. That's what God wants. So why does it have to have this level of love, especially on this type of level? And the same thing in general, that the Yichud Pnimi, the inner union of Chachma and Bina, of Abba Ve'ima, requires Mesiras Nefesh, not just mitzvahs alone. Mitzvahs alone only bring a Yichud Zun, Zohar Malchus, and the Yichud Chitzeni of Chachma and Bina. But you need Mesiras Nefesh to create the Yichud Pnimi. And why is that the case? Isn't mitzvahs themselves the Ratzon Elyon, the core desire of God? So to explain that, he went back to the idea that kalim, the root of containers, is higher than the root of energy. But when you think about it, as he explains, there's two aspects to this. One is, as it manifests in Seder Ishtalshus, so the keli, which receives from the earth, but because its root is deeper, is able to draw the earth to go, the energy that its nature would be to go upward, the keli draws it down. But that's a keli that's mamshich in the Seder Ishtalshus, and an that's commensurate to the container. So you have and keli, like an aver, an organ or a limb that draws the energy of the koyach, of the nefesh, like the eye draws the power of vision. But we say mitzvahs is deeper. We said mitzvahs reach the root of the
Hello?
let's call the neshama into the body.
Rabbi, we lost you. We couldn't hear you for
You
about.
froze for about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay.
You froze and we couldn't hear a word.
Okay. It's
George-
not okay.
George Haruni
Don't you-
left. I think he was coming back.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So the answer he gave was that the mitzvahs alone can, because they're rooted in the Ratzon Elyon, like the Kalim are rooted in the Atzmi, so that's why they have the power to draw the Eir. Maybe we could also use. So that's why they have the power to draw the Eir into the Keli. But if you want that the Keli itself should be Eir, that the Keli itself, like he said, not just that it should draw that Eir, the Chitzenish Eir, that the Kelim itself should, the Eir Atzmi should be revealed. So you too, the way the mitzvahs are performed, has to be done with an extra exertion, with an extra effort, which he calls Ava B'chol Meidecha Mesiras Nefesh. So in other words, like I mentioned yesterday, when you want to, the regular use of a person's faculties, so you need the keli there, a healthy container, let's say healthy arms and legs and eyes and ears, if the physical body is intact, if the physical body is fit, so it draws the energy of the neshama. God forbid if the body itself is in some way compromised, so it'll also compromise the flow of air into the keli. So that tells us the keli has power, but the power is to draw air into the keli. So you have a healthy body. But if you want to have something more powerful coming from deeper resources, then it's not enough just the regular air and keli relationship. Even though that too comes from the root of the keli being higher than the root of the air, which is why the keli has the power to draw that energy. If you want to have a deeper energy, which is that the air atzmi should be revealed, the very root of the keli should be revealed, there you need to have also an aveda, that the mitzvahs should be done, like he said, through with etzem neshama. You need the neshama involved, and the etzem neshama, the words he used, the neshamas, or b'chinas mesiris nefesh dafke, which reveals the etzem neshama, that reveals that innermost part of the neshama, as that's revealed, in that too impacts. So that also reveals the innermost resources. That's not just the regular flow of earth to keli, so to speak, regular in the shalshlus, but actually goes deeper into the earth atzmi, and that's why the kima mitzvahs la'achar aved mesiris nefesh dafke the mesiris nefesh dafke nimsha b'chinas hela helam begili. And the same thing when you have mesiris nefesh on Torah mitzvahs, like by Chanukah, so that too drew from atzmus ein sof, which drew all the way into the lowest levels into the Rishus Harabim, Torah de Pruda, like we explained in the parentheses here. And that's why through mitzvahs alone, ein nimsha b'chinas atzmus laka er shall be seder ishtalshus. So what requires that mitzvahs should also draw from the er atzmi, that requires that deeper avodah that comes with mesiris nefesh of the neshama. Whereas the mitzvahs alone, he makes it clear, even when they are with another preferator, but not ava b'chol meidecha, but ava v'yira al pitam v'das, which is better than just mitzvahs completely without any kavanah. There we said we don't even get any gilui in Gan Eden, but with that hakdam al pitam v'das, so the mitzvahs are completely fine. Like I said, a healthy body, the eris and the kalim are being nimshach in a completely proper way. Nothing's missing. And on the contrary, the mitzvahs are fulfilled fully. Who fulfills the mitzvah properly? When ha'oyev, someone who loves God. But nevertheless, that's still the chetzenia sa'ir that's commensurate to the containers. And that's why when a person does mitzvahs like that, they receive schar only in Gan Eden Atach. They get schar because there is some kavanah. And if the kavanah is a deeper one, the avavir and the kavanah of a seid ha-mitzvah, like we learned earlier, it's the inner kavanah of the mitzvah, you also get schar in Gan Eden Elyon. But it's still not, it's higher than Gan Eden on its own, but it's still not the atzmi. That comes only, ava b'chol meidecha, helam ha-nefesh bali deis galus. That the nefesh, the neshama, is revealing its innermost strength from the deepest resources. So it's not just that it's an keli to the keli itself is manifesting its divine source in a revealed way. And the same thing with kolosin yichud pnimi, even though mitzvahs draw the yichud, but in general the yichud, nevertheless you need the mesiris nefesh to draw the yichud pnimi, and he explains. Because be'emes yichud pnimi is also due to the mile of the kelim. However, in the mile of the kelim itself, he said there's zivug gufni and zivug neshikin. A zivug gufni, which it draws the deepest level, because it's not just a zivug neshikin like a kiss, but a complete zivug gufni, which actually creates a new neshamas. The yichud pnimi l'heirat neshamas, and that you need a veidah b'mesiris nefesh. Similar idea, just in the language of Yichud Pnimi and Yichud Chitzein. So, if you ask the question, didn't we learn earlier, the question was asked the other way around, back in the beginning of the discussion, when he asked at the bottom of page 1266, How is it that since mitzvahs are kelim, how could they draw from such a high level? To call all the way in atzmus, even though it's kelim, so he said because the kelim are rooted in the highest level, higher than earth. So seemingly you could, if you think of it ostensibly, it seems like, so what are you saying now? So what you're really saying is 2 points here. Yes, we established the kelim are rooted higher than the earth. The question is whether that impacts only the fact that the keli draws the earth of ishtalshlus into the keli, or that you actually reveal that higher source. And it's not the same thing. Like I said, a healthy body, a healthy keli will draw earth because it's rooted higher. That's why mitzvahs have such a power. But if you want the mitzvahs, if you want the kelim to be transformed and reveal their core source in the helam above, then the Aveda has to also be one that reaches deeper into the helam of the neshama and reveals that. So in essence, if I was able to sum it up before we continue, and he's going to explain this now even further, and it'll be more explained, that you could really look at it as three things going on. I'm going back to my two analogies that I've been using. One of art, the artist, and the one with a building and a structure and the intention of the builder. So let's start from the bottom up. The very piece of art or the building is coming from chitzenius ha'er for sure. Why? Because that's a means to an end. God created the art of this world, the beautiful world. He created the structure of this existence in order to serve a purpose. Just like a person who builds a home, it's not an end in itself. Even the purpose is that God should dwell in this place. So the very art, and that's called the creation of the world, is coming from the oir, the energy that associates itself. The oir hashayach la'elamis, like we spoke about. Even in the highest levels, it's already how the architect or the artist is applying himself to the particular creation. So it's a very structured oir that goes into kelim in a very limited way. That's called Shem Elikim. In that itself, we have a higher level Gan Eden, which is Havaya Elikim, but it's still part of the structure. But it's a higher level because it's Havaya Elikim. It's not just the seven lower spheres, but it's also the Gimel Rishenis, because Gan Eden already has a reflection of some of the deeper pleasure within this art or within this structure. Okay, so that's all level one. Part two is the human being has to come into play now. God places Adam and Chava into Gan Eden. La'ovdo l'shamra. So the garden, as many fruit as it produces, it's not close to what now Aveda will produce. So now you have, the second thing is the player, not just you have the piece of art or the structure, you have the one that's comes to live in the structure, which is a neshama comes down into a guf, that comes here to fulfill the purpose. That to create more energy than the world has on its own. So now, how do you do that? You have to now go into the core essence. And God says, I want you to do it through the instruments I will give you. Divine instruments. It's called Torah and Mitzvos. Torah and Mitzvos are they reflect my divine wisdom and will. The elokus that went into creating the world, there's also wisdom there. But that's a wisdom in creation, like we call milad yeta. That's God applying himself to create art. So there's a wisdom in his art. But if you want the wisdom of the artist, why he wants this art and what is its purpose, Torah and Mitzvos manifest that. So the three pieces you have here is the world in which we live, the art or the structure, the active player, which is the neshama beguf that comes into the structure to fulfill the purpose. And what instruments does this neshama use is Torah and Mitzvos. So Torah and Mitzvos manifests the atzmi of what God's very core purpose is, not just to build a house, but to turn the house into a dira b'tachtenim, and it's the neshama that implements it. If you have only one of these three, you don't have the full picture. If you only had a world, and you don't have a neshama, a human being coming into the world to do his work, and you don't have Torah and Mitzvos, you can't accomplish the mission. If you only had the neshama, and you didn't have Torah and Mitzvos, you don't have the instruments. And if you only have the instruments without the neshama and the world, you don't have the one who actually activates it and actualizes it. So now, when you put them all together, The mitzvahs are no question coming from a ratzon atzmi. But on their own, meaning when a neshama just does mitzvahs on a regular basis, without a particular b'chol ma'idecha, also with love, but a love that's more measured, that is measured toward the and the commensurate to the human being apitam v'das. So what is he doing? He's drawing a new energy, more energy into Gan Eden, more than Gan Eden has on its own. However, but it's still an energy that's relative to existence. It's more than existence on its own, because he's drawing from the artist into the art, from the architect into the building, but it's still not the full picture. However, when the neshama is active and the neshama is also now putting its energy to not just do the mitzvahs on the minimum, not to say minimal level, he says even on a complete level, but with b'chol ma'idecha, more than just regular love, but that full intense avarabba and the mesiras nefesh. So now the mitzvahs themselves are instruments. The question is, how are you going to use them? You can do a mitzvah and you can do a mitzvah. Everything is technically correct, but it doesn't necessarily have that inner passion and even inner simcha, shal mitzvah. He doesn't mention it, but the idea. Or the inner b'chol ma'idech. You're not doing it with that full, all-consuming love. That requires more than the mitzvah alone. That requires the person who's you doing the mitzvahs to do it with such an inner strength. And then you reveal the ratzon atzmi, which the mitzvahs already reveal even on the basic level, but now that the keli itself, the world itself and everything in this existence, and the kelim of the mitzvahs included, now become not just kelim for oir, but they actually reveal the very, very core essence, that now we have the artist himself being revealed, the core source of the artist himself being revealed in the art and in the structure, and not just l'fi erech, the amount of energy more than than creation has on its own, but still limited. So that is how it all comes together, and we have now that picture. So you need all of these to be able to create what he's talking here, hamshachas hamitzvahs in the fullest sense, in the coming from the Eir Atzmi, that not just the Keli is mamshech Eir, but that the Keli is transformed to Eir, that the Helam becomes Gili because we did it through our Avodah. We brought our Helam, our deepest resources into the picture. To use the example of the child and the father, the neshama is an etzem part of the father, but it's concealed. And this child on his own is separate from the father. When he does Torah and Mitzvos, he connects with his father. He embraces his father through Torah and Mitzvos. So the child is embracing the father is embracing the child. When he's learning Torah, it becomes more internalized. And now, when he does it with mesiras nefesh, he's not just embracing his father, he's actually revealing the very etzem of his connection to his father, which you could also have. It could be that there's an embrace, like you're doing mitzvahs, so there is a connection. But when it's got all-consuming love of b'chol ma'idecha from child to father, so then you have all the qualities together. The etzem is there because there's father and son. The mitzvahs create the revealed connection, and the mesiras nefesh reveal the etzem of the connection. And there you have the answer to the question of why mitzvahs need the b'chol ma'idecha, the ava b'chol ma'idecha, and mesiras nefesh to create this, to be mamshech this that we're discussing, the keli transforming it to oir, and the yichud pnimi that he discussed, the yichud pnimi that comes specifically from this type of all-consuming love. Yeah.
It's not clear to me why mitzvahs that are reaching the etzem, why is this bringing down oil, only oil mugbal? Since to reach the etzem, okay, it's not transforming the kli.
Okay,
but
what should I say? I believe I explained it yesterday. Now I explained it more at length with examples.
It could be that you
I don't know what to say.
but it's not clear to me.
Okay, so you'll think about it some more and review it again, and it'll become clear. Like, that's the way you learn. What can I tell you? I seriously feel I explained it now quite detailed, and I'm not sure what's missing.
What's missing is that the mitzvahs are reaching.
I understand what's missing. You don't understand it, but I don't feel from my end. I don't know what else I could add.
No, why is it coming only? Why is it bringing only oil mugbal?
I heard your question. You don't have to repeat the question. is the question, what should I tell you? I just explained it. I don't know what to add. I really don't know what to add. I could just repeat what I just said again, but I don't know what to add. I gave examples. I explained it with a healthy body and deeper resources to access deeper resources. So I'm not sure what else I could say. Anybody wants to weigh in here?
It's because the mitzvahs are also through the neshamas. He said, "Li'ez the neshamas hem gam kein b'chinas hakelim." But the mitzvah, even without mesiras nefesh, it's being done through the neshama.
I heard your question. The question is the question of the whole mimer here. I understand your question, but I said everything I could say about it. I really have nothing more to add. What should I tell you?
Okay.
I have a question. Are you taking questions now?
Go ahead.
Are you taking questions now?
Yeah, go ahead.
In order to bring down, the Rebbe makes a distinction between bringing down or into Gan Eden Ataxon and Gan Eden Elyon. And it seems to me that the difference is when he says Vayide Kavanas a mitzvah shul you know Ava year of Gam Ayide Kavanas, the Hakavana the Soda mitzvah Kulu Makabos Charo B'Gan Eden Elyon. What is this? The Kavana the Soda mitzvah, is that Chassidus? When you know the panemius of
He explained it. Were you here in yesterday's class?
yeah, sure.
So he explains it on page 1212. If you go to 1212, he explains what means Seid HaMitzvah.
Okay.
What he's saying here is just a summary of what it said there in 1212. If you read the second paragraph, the line that begins, He b'kavona.
Okay.
Anyway, it's a deeper level of kavona. That's the bottom line.
Rabbi Jacobson, I have a question. I understand that you just explained that through Mesir Nefesh, we're able to transform the Keli into ore. I get that. But then I always thought that there was an aspect that when the Keli expands and refines itself, as if it were, then it's able to shine and reflect back the ore that just received in a much more refined, rather than being transformed into it. Is there a distinction?
Yes, of course. That's the two levels he's discussing here. I gave a very simple example. When a person is a healthy body, he's able to function well, his faculties are working, the keli is refined. If, God forbid, the keli is not refined, a person won't be healthy, won't be able to function fully. So think of a healthy body, which is a keli that's drawing the energy of the soul into it. So the vision is working well, the hearing is working well, person's walking well. That's a healthy person. That is a person like the Oves, for example. We learned in volume 1 that they serve God to perfection, but only the energy that God allowed them to have, which is the air that goes into Ishtalshlus. Like if you recall, I explained it, that the pipelines that God used to create existence, which became rusty and corroded due to the chatoim, the sins, after the sin of the tree of knowledge and the sins that followed, like it says in Basiligani from Medrash, that every generation concealed the divine, and Avram Avinu and those that followed him, the 7 generations following him, corrected that. They cleaned up the pipes and they made the world a healthy world to be able to receive healthy energy in a seamless way. That's called a healthy body. But that is not the level of etzem ha'or in a revealed way. It's rooted there because mitzvahs are rooted there. That is what you just said, that the keli gets more and more refined, just like a mind gets more refined that can understand the teacher better. The more the keli gets refined, the more oir it could draw into it. But then there's a whole other dimension. It's a whole different paradigm shift. The Keli itself is also a divine creation. Like we learned at length, its root is higher than the root of the Ur. But what we just said, it's not revealed yet. What's revealed is that the Ur is revealed in the Keli, and they're commensurate to each other. To get the Ur Atzmi, the root of it all, that's a whole different Avodah. That's the Avodah, not just regular Torah and Mitzvos, but Torah and Mitzvos with Mesiras Nefesh. B'chol Ma'adecha. The Neshama is exerting itself, reaching deeper within itself to reveal its very core essence. So that allows that the Torah and Mitzvos should now be elevated, and they should now be infused, not just with the Ur within the Keli, but the actual root of the Keli itself that's higher than Ur altogether. The Ur Atzmi, as we learned. And that's a transformation where the body is actually feeding the soul. Till now, we talked about a healthy body receiving energy properly from the soul. And now we talk about that the body itself, or the Keli itself, is now manifesting a divine essential element. But that's only possible, like he says, to Mesiras Nefesh and B'chol Meidecha. So I really just
Thank you so much. That was perfect.
Before.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That really put everything in perspective. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
That makes it easier to understand.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear. Any other questions?
Could we say that the done through Mesiras Nefesh is when you give away, Mesiras Nefesh literally means when you give away your existence, so you say, the Nefesh as it exists in this world, when you give that away, you can dissolve, you release the panemius light of it, because you've given away that thing, and you are able to meld without the external trapping of the nefesh itself. You are able to reveal the panemius of the nefesh, which is this level that you're talking about, or essence or essence panemius. I'm saying in the word itself, Mesiras Nefesh, giving away its bottle is sort of like its Keli existence, and revealing the panemius of it.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah. You could say that. I believe earlier, when he spoke about Mesiras Nefesh, he spoke about Mesiras Haratzon. Just trying to find where it was. We discussed it more at length and gave a fuller picture of what Mesiras Nefesh is. I'm trying to remember, where was it? Was it later or earlier? There was a whole section where he spoke about Mesiras.
It looks.
Spoke about Mesiras. Can
It
everybody
looks like
just mute?
bottom of
Can
page
everybody mute?
1253.
So what, are you Googling all this?
I'm searching inside the mimer. Yes.
Okay. 1253, you said?
Yes.
Yeah, 1253 at the bottom. There he explained that Mesiras Nefesh, Mesiras Haratzon, where a person has nothing but God. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. So the end of 1253 and 1254, he discusses what the Mesiras Nefesh is, that it completely consumes the person. And that's not just doing Torah and Mitzvos on the regular basis, that complete consumption, completely consuming. So there he talks more about the Avodah, what exactly the Avodah Mesiras Nefesh does. The Gili Chadash, I see. The Yichud Pnimi. The level of Imi. Yeah. Okay, good. So with that, let's continue the next paragraph. A minute. Now, obviously, and this is something that we're going to need to discuss a little more, there's no Mesiras Nefesh and no B'chol Meidech without a neshama. Like I said yesterday, you could have Torah and Mitzvos, but if you don't have a neshama doing Mesiras Nefesh and B'chol Meidech, by definition, is a human effort. It doesn't happen on its own. In other words, the instruments, the divine instruments that I just described, which is what God gave us, that embodies his very wisdom and will, as he says in Tanya, chapter 4 and 5. It's only the person that can actually add that element of Mesiras Nefesh. So from that point of view, the neshama is critical, not just because the neshama is kalim, which is also very vital here, because that's why the neshama can affect kalim, but also that the neshama adds that whole dimension to it. But now he's going to continue and he's going to now go further and say, v'oid, and additionally, which tells us that whatever he said till now already answered the question. But the v'oid, he's not saying ubira inyan. He's going to explain what it says. He says v'oid, an additional point is shahadin isbar le'il, an additional point, or moreover, it was explained earlier, and this is on page 1251. Right before that piece of Mesiras Nefesh, 1251, if you remember when he spoke about Biti, Achesi, and Imi, how Malchus goes through three stages: daughter, sister, daughter as a recipient, sister as an equal, a sibling, and mother, Imi, Mashpia. So he explained there that Imi is neshamas that are higher than Torah. Yeah. And I see now on page 1249, he actually talks about mitzvahs, that mitzvahs also have different levels. I think it will be worthwhile to go back and learn page 1249 and 1250. But I first want to go over this because I see there are things there that are directly relevant to what we're learning now. I didn't realize the connection till now.
Saying that all neshamas are higher than Torah, or just the specific ones?
I am not going to, it's a digress question. That's not what he's talking about here. I mean, he says neshamas are higher than Torah. I mean, it means every neshama, most likely. Yeah, he brings also Yediyah Seid HaMitzvah, I see. Mm-hmm. I think there, if I'm looking close, if I'm getting it correctly, he spoke that in mitzvahs itself, you could have three levels. And the highest level is what we're talking about now, Imi, where the neshama is mashpia into Torah. Okay, let's read here, and then I'm going to refer back and go back to those pages, because I think understanding what he says here will help us understand what he said there, and vice versa. So he says, and more, Sharin is barely ill. The Shadish and the Shamis, Lamaila Meshadish HaTeira Mitzvos. That the root of souls is higher than the root of Teira Mitzvos. This he hasn't said in the previous paragraph. He just said you need Neshamas and you need the Mesiras Nefesh to reveal this Atzmi of the Kalim and transform the Helam of the Helam, the root, and reveal the root of the Kalim and transform the Helam into Gili. But now he's adding that the Sheidish and Neshamas we learned is higher than the root of Torah and Mitzvos. An absolute proof or a definite proof, Raya Muchachas.
We lost you for 5 seconds again.
We
can't hear you.
Nobody could hear me?
Well, it's static. It's breaking up and coming in. We listened after the comma. We didn't understand what you were saying.
Okay, so listen, let me try my best and we'll see how it goes. Can everybody hear? So
You're frozen again.
I'm frozen. I don't know what it is.
I don't know either because your bars are good. It's kind of strange.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. V'raya muchachas lezeh. Back on page 1251, he said the same words. What a raya muchachas, a very direct and absolute proof for this is the inyan of tshuva, minat tshuva. We see this from tshuva, and that he said, I'm just looking where he said it on page 1252, I believe. Yeah, we know this from tshuva, because if Torah and Mitzvos was higher than the neshama, and neshama, God forbid, transgresses, that would be it. But since a neshama is rooted higher than Torah, when a transgresses, is able to access tshuva, that higher level, and therefore return. Interesting way how he explains it. This power of is due to the rotzen, that God's desire and tainug and pleasure in the neshamas on their own. That your father's desire, God had a cheshek, had a strong desire for. In other words, well, let's talk an example of a parent and a child. You all can hear me clearly now? Everything is good? Okay, you talk about...
Not really, honestly.
On and off, on and off still.
Okay.
Can I just ask after the class if you can possibly post the audio sooner than usual? Because I'm wondering if the audio is better. So we can all go over this class again, because it's good stuff here, but with you breaking up, it's hard to follow you.
You can go to the YouTube, so it's always available.
Could be problems there too, because you're transmitting, but I'll check.
Maybe, okay, I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, so take a parent and a child. If, for example, in a relationship, in a business relationship, so you have two partners, and if something goes sour in their business relationship, so they can decide, you know what, let's break up, and that's it. Or one person undermines the other, or one person feels that he was defrauded, or stolen from, robbed. So that's it. It ends the relationship, unless they make up or whatever it is. There's nothing fundamentally that connects them that's deeper than the things they do for each other. At the end of the day, it's a what's the word? A conditional relationship based on certain conditions. You do this, I do this, so we have an agreement. If you break the agreement, we don't have an agreement anymore. When it comes to a parent and a child, you don't have that. Even if the child behaves in a way that the parent does not approve of, the connection is never severed. Why? Because the connection is deeper than the actions. So the same thing with the Eibishter and the Id. If we didn't have tshuva, you could say, you know what? God says, if you do Torah and Mitzvos, I have a relationship with you. If not, I don't have a relationship with you. The fact that there's ability to do tshuva tells you the connection is there, despite obviously Torah and Mitzvos manifests that connection. It's not optional, just like a parent wants a child to behave a certain way. But at the same time, the connection is there. The Ratzon Tainug, the Neshamas Mitzad Atzman, that the Eibush has a cheshek in the Neshamas themselves, precedes and is higher than the Torah and Mitzvos, and that's why there's the power of tshuva. Because the Atzmistic connection is deeper than the Torah and Mitzvos. Even though the Torah and Mitzvos are also not arbitrary. Valkein Yeshlemer. How's it now? Has it gotten better or still the same?
Much better.
Valkein Yeshlemer.
You skipped few words. Derak be'avisecho choshak Hashem.
I said that. Maybe it skipped. I said. Just in your father's God has designed, proving that there's a tainug in the neshamas themselves. And that's why you can say, Shezeu tainug atzmi mamish, that this is a tainug atzmi mamish. He's giving a chidush here. In this, a very core pleasure, a very core connection on the essential level between the Neshama and the Eibush and God. L'mayla mebchinas tainug v'atzmi v'rotzna atzmi the Torah Mitzvos. Higher than the essential and core pleasure and desire and rotzen of the Eibush and Torah Mitzvos. Now he calls this also atzmi. He's not talking about what he said before, chitzeni yisar rotzen chitzeni, which is the divine as he manifests in the art or in creation. We're talking about a rotzen v'tainug atzmi, but he says now tainug atzmi mamish, that's higher than the tainug atzmi and rotzen atzmi in Torah Mitzvos. Like the Tanit Eliyahu says. Eliyahu says, it says that the Eibishter created two things, Shnei Dvarim Kodmu Le'elam. Two things preceded existence. Torah v'Yisrael. The Eini Yedei Mi Kodem Lami. And I don't know which one preceded which. Ad, till the point he saw in the Torah, it says, Daber al B'nai Yisrael. Tzav B'nai Yisrael. So that's how he knew that B'nai Yisrael come before Torah, because he's saying the whole Torah commanded to the children of Israel. Tell it to them. So that means they are the key, and the Torah mitzvah is being told to them. So that's how you know the neshamas kodmu l'Torah. So the Rebbe asks a question. If that's the case, so why did he say any yedea? Why did he have to preface first, I don't know, and now I know? I mean, once he knows, why do we have to know that he had a doubt? Because the answer is that the truth is they're both atzmi. As I said before, the neshamas come from the very etzem of the Eibishter, like we said. Chelik elikam mal mamash. Torah and Mitzvos is the rotzen and tainug atzmi of the Eibishter, and that's why there's an expression, Yisrael araisa v'kutche brichu kul echad. Nevertheless, they play a different role. The neshamas is like the child of God. You don't say on Torah and Mitzvos it's a child of God. You say it's an extension of God's so-called limbs, evarim de malka. Chachmose yizbarach. Like when you say, for example, in Atzilus, you say, Chachma bina das. It's the Chachma bina das of the Eibishter himself. And the Neshama is more than Chachma bina das. Neshama is the etzem of the Eibishter. Like the etzem of a child connected to a father. But then the father has a rotzen atzmi too. That's the mitzvahs. So he gives the Neshama, which is a piece of his etzem, as it manifests in Torah mitzvahs, the tainug and rotzen atzmi in Torah mitzvahs. But when you really come down to it, is the neshamas that are higher. The Torah mitzvahs is definitely on a level of atzmi, but within itself. So that's why Eliyahu Navi says first, Eini Yedei, because there's a level where they are literally like one. And then when you really want to break it down, you see pikuach nefesh deicha kol haTorah. If Torah was higher than neshamas, then why? Because danger, if there's a danger to our life, so maybe Torah comes first. You don't break Shabbos, you don't break Yom Kippur. But no pekuach nefesh deicha, because the nefesh is higher than the Torah. And the same thing, like he says here, from tshuva, is the total raya muchachas, because tshuva shows you that even when they built a golden calf, Chet Egel, Moshe Rabbeinu was able to access that deeper level and bring the day of Tshuva Yom Kippur, because the connection of neshamas is even deeper than of Torah and Mitzvos. But this is not in any way to minimize the role of Torah and Mitzvos. This is not like it's optional. It's not like a person could say, hey, I'm connected anyway with my father, so who cares how I behave? That's not the way it is.
That's not the greatest argument, because it's Torah that actually tells us that Mesiras Nefesh is Kodem Torah.
Well, we're not talking about Mesiras Nefesh now. We're talking about neshamas. So fine.
It's saving a life.
So just because Torah tells us doesn't mean Torah is higher.
But
That's
you
just
can't,
because
you
the Eibush
can't
reveal
infer the opposite either.
The opposite is clear, because that's the proof that you transgress the Torah to save a life. Or in this case, that tshuva is more powerful than anything. Even a person transgresses. Like I said, if there was no core connection, who says the transgression can be healed? Okay. So he says, "Tainug atzmi mamish lamam b'chinas tainug atzmi rotzna atzmi tein mitzvos." Tam shochas chodosh mamish, because the drawing down, the generating of literally a new energy, literally a new unprecedented energy, mamish. Zeo dafka al yedei aved the neshamas dafka. It's only through the aved the neshamas specifically that you can really draw down a chodosh mamish. The ima yes. And even though the way you draw down that energy is through mitzvahs, those are the divine instruments that a neshama needs to draw the Er Chadash. In order to stimulate or arouse or awaken in the level of Atzmus Ein Sof, B'chinas Er Chadash Mamash, a completely new energy. This is explicitly through the Veda of Neshamas and the Etzem Nishmasam, with their Etzem of their Neshama, not just the outer faculties or the outer dimensions of the Neshama, like Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, but from the Etzem HaNeshama. So this is a pretty powerful piece here. Because remember, Ur Chodosh, the Uris in Kalim, like I said before with the example, a healthy body is not a Ur Chodosh. A human being is created in a way, if you keep your body fit and you condition it and you feed it and nourish it and the hygiene is proper, so the body will draw the soul's energy into it to be a healthy body. That's not a Ur Chodosh. A Ur Chodosh can come two ways. Either through digging deeper, and you're accessing the Etzem and Neshama, and that's drawing something that was not there before, or sometimes it comes taka through tshuva. When something goes wrong, God forbid, and then you dig deeper and you heal, you have to access an energy that was higher than the energy that was there in a regular healthy person in order to create the healing. So we'll see whether he discusses that. He probably doesn't discuss that here. I'm just pointing it out. So the point is, Ur Chodosh is not just a Ur Bikeli. There you're going to the Etzem and you're drawing something that was not there before. That will be La'osad Lava. In the future will be a whole new energy. In this case, it's going to be the energy of the containers, which draw completely Ur Chodosh. And he says, this is dafka through Neshamas. Yes, they do it through Torah and Mitzvos, but it's the Neshama, but it's not, but the Torah and Mitzvos is because that's the way God said, these are the tools. This is how you dig deeper and you access deeper energies. But the one that does it is the neshama as it works with its etzem neshama. Now he's going to explain this. The next section starts with Bira Inyan. Inyanhu rather. Inyanhu. He's going to explain mitzvahs in context of neshamas and how they work with each other. So I'm going to stop here by Inyanhu, but I'll take any questions. So remember, he didn't yet explain it. He just made the statement. And clearly said a yesh lemer, so it's like a chiddush from the Rebbe Rashab, but he's going very deep into the levels of these highest levels of neshamas and mitzvahs and how they interact with each other. But please, if anybody has any questions.
I have a question. It's a bit sacrosanct, so forgive me, but I'm exploring this inyan that you just explained here about the power of the neshama to bring out an or chadash. If it sort of digs deep, so to speak, and essentially behaves at its best, Mesiras Nefesh v'chol me'odecha. And what's sacrosanct about what's disturbing about my question is, suppose a non-religious Jew, a secular Jew, were to say, this is great. All I have to do is be a good person. I have to be kind. I can't lie. I have to be a good person. I have to behave like God. In other words, in the very macroscopic sense. What's the point of this Torah and Mitzvos? All I got to do is be a good person and behave properly, not hurt anybody, and I'm drawing out the deepest, the essence of my soul, and I'm elevating myself and the world, and I'm bringing out an or chadash. Yes, of course, it would be better if I did Torah and Mitzvos, but what's critical? I mean, I can still.
What being a good person is Torah and Mitzvos. It's part of Torah and Mitzvos to be a good person.
But it's exactly what, let's say, non-observant Jews say. They say,
Well, one second. Part of Torah and Mitzvos is summed up by Hillel and by Rabbi Kiva in one statement.
Yeah.
Don't do unto others that you don't want done to yourself. Love another. So yes, a person who's a good person, a kind person, is doing the biggest mitzvah of all. But that doesn't mean anybody knows that even if you're doing one good thing, it doesn't mean you can't grow and do more good things. But being a good person is absolutely a mitzvah too. Whether you call it a mitzvah or you don't call it a mitzvah, it is a mitzvah.
True.
Because you could also make the argument that a person doesn't want to be good. It could be selfish and so on. So it's a matter of just another aspect of Torah and Mitzvos. So that's what I would say. I mean, I wouldn't classify people as observant and not observant. I would classify, what do you want to do with your life? Now, some people don't know about other mitzvahs. They weren't taught, or they don't understand its value. So you need to explain it. That's how I would approach it.
Okay, good response.
And another example I would use, if let's say a person likes music and they know how to play piano by ear. And you say to them, hey, if you learn the notes, you'll play even better. They say, what do I need notes for? I can play music. When you play notes, you'll play something that's time-tested. You'll be able to reach deeper ways of expressing your music and your talent. That's how I would explain the whole idea of Torah and Mitzvos. It's divine instruments to be the best we can be, to live up to our mission and purpose. And it's all around being a good person, obviously, but it goes even further than that. You could also be good. You could be good on your terms. There's also going to levels of bittul, where you become good also on higher terms, like constantly growing. A person wants to constantly grow. That's part of this process as well.
Shkoyach, thank you.
If the connection of a Hashem with Neshamas Yisrael is an asmiistic connection that's higher than Torah, how come in like Parshas Kisisa when they do the Cheder Egel, Hashem says, "V'ata nicha li v'yicharati b'hem v'achalei." I will destroy them. Let me be, and I'll destroy them, and I'll make you, Moshe, a great nation. Could a father say to a son, you violated what I told you?
That's what Moshe. That's why Moshe argued with God. That's what Moshe said back to Hashem. You created them. You have a deeper connection, and Hashem was responding, but they severed it. They betrayed me. What do you want? They're the ones that disconnected themselves from me. I'm not disconnecting from them. And Moshe needed to work 80 days to gain that salachti kidvarecha. This doesn't mean that we can't create. I mean, all of Golus. You could ask questions the whole Golus, every punishment in Torah. Now, the truth is because of God's love that all these negative things happen. But the fact of the matter is, there's the Father and the Son. The connection may be there. But you know what? Even a person who's a criminal in prison, who's murdered people, is still a child of God. But that's not exactly living up to what God wants. So God was saying there's cause and effect in this world. There's real consequences. It's not like you can do anything you like. When you do enough avodah and exertion, and Moshe Rabbeinu showed that he's ready to be Moser Nefesh, exactly the word Moser Nefesh, and that the Jews will do proper tshuva. It wasn't just, okay, you know what, they can do whatever they want. They're my child, or whatever they say, whatever happens, I always forgive them. It doesn't work that way. To gain forgiveness requires a lot of work. It took 40 days to receive the Torah. It took 80 days to gain forgiveness. Yet to reach the etzem is not a game. It requires a real void of etzem and neshama. Mesiras nefesh is not just, oh, nice line. Okay, I'll do whatever I want, then I'll have Mesiras nefesh and I'll regain favor. Mesiras nefesh is heart's blood, sweat, and tears of real hard work, of real tshuva, where you, with your gut and with your completely transforming yourself. Many people find it not that easy to do. The proof of tshuva is that ultimately tshuva can achieve it, but it doesn't mean it comes easily. A wife betrays her husband, or a husband betrays his wife. Yeah, they may love each other, but it also can sever it to the point that that there's divorce. There is a thing in Torah called divorce. Now, in a way, case of get krisis, sometimes golus is called divorce, in a way. Now, this doesn't mean be'etzem, it's there, but you have to. It's not a simple process.
So when a God forbid a Jew is high as Korah, he's cut off completely from God. You're saying that's only at a certain level, that panemius, his neshama can never be cut off from God, because he has that essential father and son relationship that no matter what he does, he's still internally connected to his father.
This is discussed in Sfarim. The Ramban talks about it because it says, "V'nichrasa ha-nefesh ahi," the nefesh will be cut off, not just the body. And I discussed this a while back. I don't remember if I posted an article about it. Remember, I spoke about it, Yitzchok, and I said I would post an article I wrote about this based on a letter from the Rebbe. So there's a lot of discussion on this. What does that mean, Karis? Or even when you say Kol Yisrael Yeshlam Chelik Le'elam Haba, then it says Chutz, except certain people who don't have a Chelik in Elam Haba. What does that mean? And one of them is someone who denies in Tchis HaMesim. So it's Midah Keneged Midah. If you deny Tchis HaMesim, you can't have Tchis HaMesim. So what does that mean in the context of neshamas that we're describing? So I wrote I have an article that I asked my office to post it, and then I would send a link.
I don't think they did.
Okay, so I'll find it now. That addresses this more in detail. It's more complicated than it sounds. It's not just everybody stays connected, because the question is, if you really get cut off, it could very well be that you in your tzir, in your identity, will not have a relationship any longer. But the neshama in another person's body, or in another gilgul, or in another tzir, can continue on. So there are things that we can lose. It's not like there's nothing to lose. There is much to lose when karas or other things happen. So it could be that the neshama will continue, but not your identity. So that's part of the discussion that I'll find it and I'll get it to you guys. Okay. So we'll start by Ian, who almost, 3/4